Welcome to another of my videos or blog posts on mental health. And even though it's been a while since I've attended any art events to review, I thought I should pop over to North London to visit the Camden Health Centre in order to attend an event called Fragmentary, or actually it's Artist Talks. This event was promoted by the Free Space Gallery. Basically, the Free Space Gallery promotes health and well-being through the arts, using their prominent positions within the Kentish Town Health Centre and the Queen's Present Practice. Now, you can actually check out their site, which is Free Space Gallery, which is all one word, .org. So going back to the 5th of June 2015, what exciting arts presentations was I expecting to hear and view? Now, before I continue, this event, as I've mentioned before, is called Artist Talks and was really presented by Fragmentary, which also has its own website called fragmentary.org. Now, this site actually helps showcase artists' work through the field of mental health, especially using photography as the form of creativity. And again, you can check out that website through its site called fragmentary.org. Now, at the event we had 3 artists talk about their journey through mental illness and capturing their experiences through the power of art. The event was chaired by Anna McNay, who is a writer. She's also an editor and researcher, and she's actually the deputy editor of State F22, which is a magazine about art and photography. She's also an arts editor of Diva magazine, which is the UK and Europe's leading lesbian and bisexual magazine. So if you've got time, check out her site. Anna opened up the event by talking about her own personal experience of chronic skin picking, which is actually a form of mental ill health. The 3 artists presenting their work through talks and images were Daniel Regan, who's also a photographer with service user experience. We also had Liz Atkin, another visual artist, talking about capturing her journey through mental illness using visual arts and photography. And we also heard from Antonia Attwood, whose video presents an exploration of her mother's illness. But first up to present on that day was Daniel Regan, who briefly talked about his website, danielregan.com, and his book called Fragmentary, which explores the dual perspectives of both the clinician and patient. So if I don't get his full ideas during that event, please take a look at his book if you come across that. Now, Darren explained how he felt that photography works as a tool for recovery, as he battled for years suffering chronic mental health difficulties. Then he talked about his different projects. One was called the Abandoned Project, where it was actually in hospital a long while ago, but he actually had the idea of capturing what an abandoned mental health facility could look like, as he felt drawn to vast open spaces. And Daniel's main aim was the purpose of actually sharing the pictures he took, but at the same time keeping those pictures slightly hidden or out of focus. Another project Daniel spoke about was his Insular project, which tries to promote a continuous cycle of recovery involving the idea of chaos. He then talked about how difficult it was for him to complete his master's project because he was actually still trying to deal with his mental health conditions while visiting the community mental health team. But every so often, during his visits to the community mental health team, they would produce patient reports or medical forms. One perhaps being the CPA care plan approach form, perhaps, which Daniel felt quite emotional about because what was written about him. Then he mentioned how people questioned him about the images he took and why he kept them to himself at times. But then he talked about the use of exploration of those images of the body and skin and how the images actually work together. For myself, I felt quite interested about his term of oversharing or undersharing of his artwork and trying to balance that line. And also how he described how people interpreted his artwork. Then he used the idea of medical notes and his self-portrait in order to explain the personal problem of sharing his work and actually breaking the stigma of mental illness. Then he used the perspective of fragmented reality of the consultant's view of how he himself reflects on mental illness. The next artist to present their work was Antonia Attwood, and she actually presented her work called Mother's Tongue, and this was a video which actually looks to interpret Antonia's mother's experiences of bipolar, which is a mental health condition. Now, as I watched the video, I could not help but notice the sounds were quite unsettling, and how the images used in the video seemed to show the battle with mental health problems. From what I saw, it was basically what I've seen as the constant use of taking medication, and also the high-pitched sounds and the images that were swirling, and how I noticed the person in the video seemed to be sleeping quite a lot. Antonia explained about her mother's experience with bipolar disorder, which inspired her project. Antonia talked about the phenomenology, which is the study of structures of consciousness of using this in mental illness and how it feels to be vulnerable. Antonia wants the film or the video she made to make you question the idea of mental health. And the last artist to present their work at the Artist Talk event was Liz Atkin, a visual artist who uses art to present the mental health condition of skin picking, which she suffers from. Liz suffered from this from an early age, and this is when the condition actually first shown itself, even though at that time she felt that this was actually an unintended response to basically what she was going through. Liz thought nothing strange about it at the time, but it was only after a while before people were questioning Liz and other experiences that Liz began to struggle to sort of fit into society. Eventually, though, Liz got interested in art and dance, and Liz talked about those interests and how she actually studied those art and dance. However, there was a feeling of dread when she was doing that course of having to explore and present her condition through the movement of her body and through her artworks. Liz wondered if she was going to be actually exposed. Still, Liz created photos where skin was pressed against glass and how the skin could transform due to the light. Liz also experimented with different devices and different mediums, one being a scanner, in order to try and capture her face and also capture her face moving, and just to view how the final image would form. Liz Atkin also explained how she was fascinated on how scars presented themselves in art, and the process of how scars heal as if the skin would knit itself together. She talked about the process of being alone in her journey and using art to reflect this, and how it led her to perhaps cope through the illness. Liz talked about overcoming her fear of insects in Japan. I mean, she spoke about quite a few other things, but some things I found interesting, where she actually was speaking about those large insects over in Japan when she was studying over there, in which she felt that insects actually made her skin crawl. But then again, due to being fascinated with the insects movement, she actually incorporated the insects movements into her dance studies. And as with many artists at the event, Liz has done some collaboration work with other artists, and with one of the artworks she's shown was with 7 artists who exemplified the process of skin picking. Liz also has done some work over at the Bethlehem, and she recently presented her artwork at the London Anxiety Festival 2014, called Curdled, which was shown over at the Morsley Learning Centre, also known as the Ortis. Well, after the presentation from the 3 artists, there was a question and answer session from the chair, Anna McNay. And Anna asked several thought-provoking questions, one being on how the 3 artists felt about showing their work on their personal journeys through mental illness. This was the first to speak about how she was at first terrified about the truth coming out during her studies. The artwork became more important than the illness as a way for others to contact her through her experiences. As for Antonia, her work was mainly about someone else, so it could have been difficult to produce this if others actually knew the person she was presenting about. Although a lot also depended on Antonia's close relatives' views. For Mark, he was nervous about the work he produced, since he did not want to share his pictures with anyone until he actually understood the work he was making. But he eventually did share his work and present his artworks, although he actually did wonder if he was stigmatizing himself. We had another interesting question and statement from the chair, who wondered if there was a fine line between undersharing and oversharing the artwork, and Mark felt as long as people asked him a bit about the labels he was diagnosed with, then he'll try and remove or talk deeply into those labels to counteract stigma. Mark tends to obscure things to avoid the under and oversharing, and he tries to make art for others who are perhaps going through difficult days. At least there's something for them to relate to. For Antonia, she actually tries to obviously avoid the name of the person she's presenting her video or art about, but still, as I mentioned before, some may know the person she's presenting on. But this led to a different outcome, as for others who do not fully know the person or do not fully understand the idea of mental health, they can actually relate to the story quite differently, and this actually led to some interesting results. One last question raised by the chair was on the dual perspectives, on how the camera shows things in another perspective. And Liz answered Anna's question by stating that the camera is very important in her work, and that she works with the camera often because it provides a way to record her illness in the sense of transformation, where it becomes almost healing. Mark felt that the idea of discussing the authenticity of the photograph could take ages to discuss at that event, but it could be hard to actually center on the illness, because the moment someone actually takes a picture of something, then the reality is gone. Now, although I spent a lot of time writing up what was being said at the event, part of the time I actually paused as the artwork and photography presented caught my attention. Now, all three of the artists' work were deeply thought out and left space for the viewer to try and connect to the art. And I noticed that the audience were required to think about what was shown in front of them, as quite a lot of the art is actually not as clear cut as it seems, especially within the realm of mental health, which can be difficult to explain if you are either a service user, health professional, or even carer like myself. The thing is, I actually enjoy art where you are required to at least think a bit, have some reflection and speculate, as long as you are not too off the mark completely. And we all have our stories to tell, and being invited into someone's world where the experiences are very personal, I feel should be held in high regard. Now, some work, I must admit, can startle the viewer who has little idea of mental health, but most work slowly actually beckons the user to take a closer inspection and observe how art can actually heal. One of the most important things I could actually take away from this event and from the three artists' work is that I'm actually learning more about mental health. I'm learning from the mental health survivors' views, and I'm learning from the world of art. I feel education can be painfully slow at times if you're learning about mental health, but learning through art can make learning a bit more appealing. Now, I loved how Daniel focuses on teasing the user on showing his medical records through artwork, but also obscuring the full view of those who view the records. It's like you just cannot fully read his medical records, and it seems to come with a double meaning, as in real life medical records and terminology can be sometimes difficult to understand or even comprehend, especially if you are those using the services. I also liked Antonia's film and how it got my attention from the get-go, where it was using unsettling sounds and images. Now, I felt I was closing in and experiencing what it's actually like to go through a mental ill health experience or condition. Yet part of me knew I was not fully experiencing the effects of mental ill health, but her video certainly opened the door, and I could feel myself slowly walk in. With Liz Atkin's photography, it's always a delight to learn from her difficult journey, and she teaches others through her artwork the meaning of the condition of skin picking. The colour of her photography stands out and allows others to examine and learn, and some images are startling, I admit that, but to be honest, I'm not so naive not to expect this, and I welcome the presentation into a personal journey. Now, overall, I really enjoyed the event and look forward to the next art event, depending on which one I go to. If I had a hat, as you can see I don't, I would take it off to the brilliant artists who took their time to portray their difficult journey through mental health to produce such lovely pieces of photography and art for others to reflect and learn. Thank you for watching.